Today, we're talking about the concept of barrier to entry and how it is applied to design theory. If you don't understand this concept, you could be unaware of one of the key factors that determines user adoption of a design. Barrier to entry is an economic concept that describes the initial set of obstacles a business has to overcome or costs it has to incur in to be able to enter a new market. This might be of financial or regulatory nature. If we translate this concept from the field of economy to the field of design, and we reframe it to focus on the different types of barriers a user might encounter or costs they need to incur in that inhibit or make it difficult for a user to adopt a design, we can definitely say finances are one of them. As a design has a higher price point, less users can acquire it. But there is another barrier that comes into play for this concept of barrier to entry. When looking at it through a design theory lens, that is much more interesting and consequential, in my opinion, and that is complexity. There are two major variables to the barrier of entry concept, and both are explicitly named: the component of the barrier and the component of entry. Let's talk about the component of barrier first. This barrier can take different shapes and forms, but it usually prefers the iteration of cognitive complexity. This is where, to be able to operate or navigate the design successfully, the designers are requiring the users to be able to handle a high volume of information and or have a deep understanding of the design's relatively complex systems from the very beginning. That tend to quickly, if not immediately, meet a user's cognitive limitations. These limitations tend to be of cognitive nature. Think of mental processes like memory, attention, perception, reasoning, among others. The second component is the entry. This means the location at where the users encounter this cognitive complexity within the design. Complexity in a design is not inherently bad, and it can be a good thing, but it has to be carefully placed within the design to enhance the experience instead of completely inhibiting it. For example, let's say this horizontal line represents the design experience as a whole. You can think of grabbing a coffee mug, to operating a smartphone, to playing a board game, to driving a plane, and anything in between. And we have three dots on it, representing the start, middle, and end of this design experience, proposing something akin to an introductory, engagement, and disengagement phases within the design experience. This line above the design experience represents the amount of cognition required to be handled by the user at any given point in the design. If this line is flat, it represents close to zero cognitive requirements. As a point in the line gets higher, that represents a relatively increasing amount of cognition required, which reflects the level of cognitive complexity that needs to be overcome or incurred in by the user to be able to operate the design at that point. Remember, this complexity spike is when large amounts of information is required to be handled or complex systems to be understood by the user that surpass the brain's comfortable cognitive capabilities of faculties like our memory, amongst others. If we find that this complexity spike is at the end of the experience, this means that the user has already been navigating the design successfully and is arriving at the end of the experience. And having this complexity spiked at the end gives designers more flexibility to guide and teach their users and basically train them through their design on how to manage this level of complexity in a way that feels natural and comfortable getting to this point. This could look like a gradual complexity increase that feels like a ramp up to the spike or a staccato moment in the experience where a lot is needed in a specific moment. Think of video games with very good tutorials, the ones that don't even feel like tutorials at all, where you start the game by only moving your character and understanding that you only need the joystick to move that character. And at the end of the game, you're having to smash 1 million buttons all at the same time in the specific sequence within a time frame to be able to have the winning move. And you're doing all of this almost seamlessly. Or a movie that at the end is giving you the cathartic moment by putting together all these tidbits of information and suggestions given to you throughout the whole movie to create a very memorable unfolding and resolution of the storytelling experience. At the end is where the movie expects you to handle that large amount of information that has been given to you throughout the movie to be able to arrive at the conclusion. If the complexity spike is located at the middle of the design experience, this means the designers have less time to teach their users how to manage complex interactions, which means that the complexity spike can't get too high, or they run the risk of having their users abandon their design. In contrast with the complexity spike being located at the end of the design experience, which enjoys not only the affordance of having more time to prepare their users for that climb up the spike, but it also enjoys the momentum of the user's investment of time in the experience, which makes a user less likely to abandon the design at that point the more they are invested in it. So design with the complexity spike located at the middle need to provide a less steep complexity spike to overcome. Think of a design experience like your smartphone, where it is relatively easy to learn how to manipulate the minimal physical buttons that are located at the side of the phone and the digital interfaces of the device, like swiping to get access to it and just tapping on an app to have access to all of the varying plethora of apps and their different levels of complexity. But also think how easy it is to just disengage with the phone. If the complexity spike is located at the very start of the design experience, this means that to be able to even engage with the design at its most basic level, the user has to manage the complexity spike first, which tends to quickly turn people away from a design. The design is asking a lot of effort from the user without the user perceiving what the reward for that effort is going to be. If the complexity spike is located in the middle or end of the experience, the player has had time to experience part of the design and can start forming a sense of investment, or can just assess if they like it or not, and if it's worth for them the effort to overcome the complexity spikes presented to them for them to be able to keep enjoying the design. Additionally, when the complexity spike is located at the very beginning of the experience, the designers themselves are not leaving themselves any space to be able to teach or acclimate their potential users to the design. Board games are a very good example of this, as they are a bit of trapped by their own medium constraints to having to have a high complexity spike at the very beginning. Board games are an analog experience in which no one except a piece of paper is present to teach you all the intricacies of the game system. Plus, you have to first understand what each piece is, where it goes on the board, and its relation to any other component of the game. I mean, just can see all the little pieces on this awesome game, but it's a lot to take in at the very beginning. You have to understand a high percentage of the design before even being able to engage with the design itself. For example, Magic the Gathering is very cognizant about their complexity spike at the very beginning of their user's design experience, coupled with their constant addition of thousands of cards per year to their overall card pool to the game, which exponentially increases the complexity interactions available in the game to be understood by the players. And so they're always looking for ways to lower that barrier to entry to the game in different ways, like creating liminal card designs or creating introductory versions of the game that strip away a lot of the complexity and that just make it easier for someone to understand the basics of the game. Just like there are no wrong nodes, just wrongly placed nodes, I tend to approach design elements in the same way. And that includes the complexity spike we have been talking about so far. Complexity spikes in a design experience are not inherently bad. They are actually necessary. If not, you end up with an extremely boring experience. They just need to be understood and managed correctly. If we had no complexity spikes, we would find everything boring and uninteresting, which is an equally, if not worse, situation than a complexity spike, in my opinion. But as this video has been iterating on, if we go too high or place it in the wrong spot in the experience, complexity spikes can be detrimental and even deadly to a design. A relatively high complexity spike at the start of your design could be creating a barrier for entry, but it could also be that the nature of the design itself, like the medium of board games that we mentioned, are just trapped. It's just inherent to that medium, and there's no way getting around it. So your job as a designer is not to eliminate that complexity spike, but actually to learn how to manage it. It could also be seen as setting expectations for what is required to navigate and enjoy this particular design experience from the onset, and having the added benefit of being able to filter out non-long-term users quicker. This concept applies to pretty much all the design fields. Everything from video games to board games to product, graphical, architecture, and systems design, but is seldom discussed, let alone understood to be used intelligently for the benefit of a design and its users. As always, I am looking forward to your comments. Let me know your thoughts on how you have seen this concept of the barrier to entry played out and affect your own design experiences in positive or negative ways. Let me know of anything you think I should consider or look into to expand my own understanding of this concept and how it applies to all the different design fields and mediums. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Simon, and on this channel, I talk about everything design, giving non-designers, as well as fellow designers, a wider window into the whole world of design. If you found this video provided some value, make sure to click that like button and subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my upcoming videos. Watch time is the most important metric right now here in YouTube to be able to grow. Please go ahead and share this link with your friends and family. With that said, I will see you in the next video.